All right, we're live.
We're live.
We're live. Welcome back to Hobby Vomit. I am Matt, and I'm here with the beautiful.
I don't know about that, but hi, I'm Ian.
And we're here to finally do our Deadhouse Gates book review. If you saw on our channel, we did a discussion series breaking down the book by each part and doing a full in-depth spoiler discussion on each part. And now we are here to tell you what we thought of the book as a whole. So if you're new to Hobby Vomit, then welcome. We take our books through our coveted B.A.R.F system. It's being adapted all over BookTube and the world, really.
Yeah, every time someone vomits, they're thinking of us. So.
Yeah, that's right. I was on a chat the other day with some other booktubers, and someone was like, "Oh, yeah, I just subscribed. I like your toilet thumbnails." I was like, "Thanks."
I probably realized it was a toilet thumbnail before I did, honestly.
Yeah. I thought it was really funny. I was like, that's a nice compliment. Anyway, so B.A.R.F, the B.A.R.F system we have here, we take books through this, and we are going to score the book on 4 separate categories. So each of the letters in B.A.R.F stands for one of those categories. So now we'll tell you what those are. B is believable, so how believable are the characters in their setting. A is authorial voice. So in this, we kind of discuss the prose, the world building, and just overall appeal of the book. Rhythm is R, which is about the pacing and plotting of the book. And then F is feeling. So what feeling or impression did the book leave us with, if it made us feel anything at all? And then after we go through those 4 categories in a spoiler-free way, we'll score each of those out of 5. We will then give you the final score for the book, which is just the average of those 4 scores. And then we'll pitch the book to you, why it might be for you or might not be for you. Then what we're going to do is rank the series. So currently, we've only read the first 2 books, so kind of our current ranking of those 2 books. And then we'll get into spoilers. So the first part of this will be spoiler-free, no spoilers, just general thoughts. Then we'll kind of go back through the B.A.R.F steps and talk in a more spoiler way. After that, I think that's really it. We'll have like a series review as a whole. So far, which Ian will elaborate on that as we reach that point in the video. But yeah, that's it. Let's jump in. So Deadhouse Gates by Steven Erikson, Book 2, and Malazan, Book of the Fallen. So do you want to say any general thoughts before we get to believable?
So just in terms of some general thoughts, and this will kind of come up when we do the review of the book and the series as a whole. I'm always kind of one of those readers that I like to review books both as a standalone book, but then also how it contributes to the series. I know that can be kind of difficult because some books really do depend upon the fact that they're in a series. And so that's, I'll be probably a little bit more critical earlier than I would be later, because at book 6, right? If book 6 is you have to have read the first 5 books, you're probably committed by the time you get to book 6.
Yeah.
But I think there's some interesting things that we can kind of discuss with books as being how standalone are they versus how well did they fit into a series. So you may see some of that inform the 4 systems. And then I'll get to this when I kind of get my pitch, but I actually I do think that to a certain extent you probably could actually start with Deadhouse Gates if you wanted to. Although the book before this, Gardens of the Moon, is also very, very good. But yeah, so just some general notes. So you might see both of those things kind of influence how I rate things or how Matt rate things, kind of how well does it stand on its own versus how well does it fit into a series.
Yeah. Very cool. And then, just a little before we go in. So yeah, we're ranking each of these out of 5. And then we're going to, give the average score. This is a type of book. This is really the first book that's happened for me where I might take some liberties, and if I'm being objective versus giving a little boost just off of feeling. And so yeah, you'll kind of see that as we get into it. But yeah, let's jump in. So our first category is B, believable. How believable are the characters in their setting? Ian, what did you score this out of 5?
I give this one a 4.5, which I'll just go ahead and little spoiler on my scoring, not on the book, but that is the lowest score I will be giving today. Not that this was bad, but just everything else is phenomenal. So I give it a 4.5. The main reason why I give it a 4.5 is just because I think that there are several characters in the book that if they were not in the book, I probably would not notice. Now, when I say several, we're talking about like a handful of dozens and dozens of named characters in the story. So, in terms of the overall characters that we see, there are so many good and notable and memorable characters, both protagonists and antagonists, like throughout the book, that it is easily in a high four. But ultimately, just kind of considering the fact that we had these characters that I didn't see as kind of believable, and I just felt like, really, again, if they weren't there, I wouldn't even notice. I was like, it's probably like a 4.5 for me.
Yeah, awesome. I'm pretty close. I'm at I'm at like 4.75. I don't think it's perfect. I think like arguably this is maybe Erikson's like weakness. Like if we have to go there, like, I just think because there are so many characters, I don't maybe get as much time as I'd want with all of them to really feel like I'm as connected as I could be. But with that being said, I think his dialogue is so good, like the best dialogue I've ever read, to the point where sometimes all I need is like two sentences in a conversation. I'm like, I know you. I get it. I don't need that extra time sometimes. And so I'm a little conflicted because I'm like, they feel very, very human, and they all feel very distinct too. So I think like it's, that's an achievement on one hand. On the other, I'm like, I do wish there was maybe a little more character work. So 4.75. This is one of those categories where I, it's like a 5, but like if I'm being objective or trying to be objective, yeah, it's like a 4.75. So that is our believable scores.
Yeah, and I would say one highlight I will say over having read like two of Erikson's books, I would say like as a fantasy writer, one of the things I do really appreciate about his approach to characters is it doesn't feel like he's trying to let archetypes carry all the water for him. Even though some characters may you might associate them with like common fantasy archetypes, it does feel like if we're spending less time with a character, that's just a part of his writing style. He's not usually like, oh, here's this damsel in distress character. That's all you need to know. We're moving on, right? It's just like, no, he doesn't let the archetypes carry water. And I do actually really appreciate that as an author. It makes it feel less tropic and feels, again, kind of lets the world breathe a little bit.
Yeah.
Sometimes you just have to trust that the character will come back, or maybe not at all, and you just have to accept that that's okay, or maybe you don't, right? But I think that's kind of cool.
That's something that like I can't go through a video without mentioning Stephen King, but Stephen King often will just plop a character in for a page and then plop them out, and you'll never hear from them again. But like you really feel like you understand that character's motivations, their history, and you don't have to do that, but it just really brings a lot of life to the world, I think. And another thing I really love about his character work is just it can like elicit some pretty serious reactions out of readers and me. There are a lot of characters in this book that people are like, I hate that character. But like I don't hate them. You know what I mean? Like they're a really well written character and you are meant to be frustrated, and he just does it so well that he really does elicit like some like frustration or joy or whatever towards those characters. So I think that overall it's super it is still a strength, like for sure. I think without good character work, this book would really just, I think Malaz maybe in general just wouldn't work. Well,
I think it's always going to be really tough to make a character that should frustrate you, that you should be mad at, but that you're willing to keep reading.
Yeah.
And like this book has pieces of that, and I think again, I may not like certain characters, but I definitely still recognize that that frustration is a frustration at the character, and that the only way to move forward with that frustration is to continue to read. And I'm in, and I can even with that frustration trust Erikson in that journey. So he does a phenomenal job with that for sure.
Yeah, I agree. All right, let's move on to the next category, which is authorial voice. So we're going to discuss prose, world building, and just general appeal of the book. And then maybe I'll go first for this one. We'll jump back and forth. So this, I think, is just it's a 5 out of 5. I think this is Erikson's strength. You can see, I mean, his prose is beautiful, but also super effective. It does force you to, a lot of times people talk about this series as really challenging. And I agree and I disagree. I think it just requires your concentration. If you sit down and you say, I am going to focus on this book, you can't read this book like a popcorn book. You can't tune in and tune out. You just can't. But like if you are focused, you're going to get everything that he wants you to get. It's not going to hold your hand, but it's done in a way where when things come together, you will get it. And I think that's a really hard thing to do, but he does it beautifully. The world building is great. I mean, it's huge. This book really just expanded. We went from a continent to another continent, and we're just learning all of this history. And you can tell his love for history is in this book, and it just really shines. So I think, yeah, world building is excellent. His prose is excellent. And then just general appeal. I mean, the cool factor of Malazan as a whole is just insane. I do think maybe the cool factor of this book is a little lower, maybe. Especially as someone, I think you talked about too, is like we're not big desert people. Or at least, I'm not. I don't get super stoked about like a whole book in a desert. But if you're into like military fantasy and that interests you, I mean, I think the appeal factor is through the roof. You're following, a big military fantasy. That's I know we're trying to keep it spoiler free, so I'll just say that. But I think if the cool factor is there, the character work is there, the emotional impact is there, I think there's just not really anything not to love about this book. So 5 out of 5 for me.
Yeah, and so I also rated this as a 5 out of 5. I think that there are a lot of different ways you could kind of approach this, and I know that there are different factors of this that appeal to different people. If you're one of those fantasy readers that really appreciates the magic of the universe, I think that Steven Erikson has a really, really interesting magic system that is only further explored in this book. We learn a lot more about his approach to the magic of the world. And we also see how deeply rooted that magic is in the history of the world and the lore of the world in this book as well. And so it's very much expanded what Gardens of the Moon has sort of started for us, which I really appreciated. I think it's a very fascinating system. I think I still have so many questions. It is a soft magic system. So for those that really like hard magic systems that are like Harry Potter in a way, where it invites you to use the magic system to solve problems with the protagonist, that's not this. I don't enjoy that as much personally. I like soft magic systems. So if you really like, for example, like the magic systems, let's say of like, Tolkien's Middle Earth, then like you'll really love this. I think the way that he, I think I've mentioned this before on the series. So certainly I've told you, and I think I mentioned it when we were interviewing Chance. But when I got into D&D, one of the things that I always read and people always told me is like, you may make a world, don't lore dump on your party, where they stumble into something. And you're like, great, you've activated my trap card. Prepare for 20 minutes of exposition.
A scroll pops out and it unrolls and unrolls and unrolls.
And it's just like you can't do that because it just detracts from it, just completely deflates the experience, even though you're itching, you want to, right? And I think that like Steven Erikson just has such a good way in which he like rolls out the lore of the world. So I think that if you're really interested in like lore and world building and history, you very much like want to stick with this book because it's going to do it so well. The last thing I wanted to mention was in terms of prose. I mean, I think Matt hit the nail on the head, but I think one of the things we were discussing this before we started recording, but there are different ways in which you might approach writing something. There are like different writing styles. Erikson is not one of those authors who's trying to have like poetry for prose, although at certain moments he does have very beautiful writing. There are certainly other authors I think that kind of do have that sort of poetry. That's not really his approach, and that's okay, right? But there are other elements that I've learned about. I'm not a writer, but my wife is, and so working with her, like in her short stories and her competitions, I've learned about uses of different techniques in writing styles. And it's kind of it's very impressive actually seeing how well Erikson can shift his writing style at different moments in time, like using short sentences with direct language versus longer sentences with more fluffy language, or kind of in a way almost even using prose as like a kind of sleight of hand, drawing your attention to one thing when something else is occurring in the background. And he can do this with such strong effect that it just felt like with all of the scenes throughout the book, especially some of the really important ones following some of our main characters, he was just really able to use his different, like I would say, different writing styles to draw attention and drama to where it needed to be. And I love how that all came together, and I think that it just shows a real strength to his overall writing technique that he can employ so many different styles of prose throughout the story.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I
Yeah, so
wouldn't say it's not lyrical, but it's
no, it's
like
not.
very it can still be beautiful in its own way, and like
Hmm.
it's all I think he's fairly philosophical and very highlightable. I
Yeah.
think if someone is reading this, they could probably highlight like once a page, and a lot of that's through like dialogue. And I think what's interesting to me is like sometimes when you read stuff that's philosophical, it can be heavy-handed and be like, "All right, I know what you're trying to tell me, author," but he does it. And it's normally that's because it's when like two characters are talking. They're like, "I think the world's this way," and you're like,
Mhm.
okay, but sometimes he'll do that. Erikson does that, but it's just something about the way he writes his dialogue. It feels so natural, and yeah, he can just have some character that hasn't spoken for pages just say one of the most like profound things in like one
Yep.
sentence. And you're like,
Mm.
all right, and it just
Okay.
feels right and it feels believable. Like they would say that. He's not just using it to like show off his chops. He's doing it because it serves the story, and I think that's what makes his prose so special. And
Mhm.
just oh man, it's just one of those things. I'm like, how? I'm not a writer. I can't write worth anything. But like, if there's a part of me that's like, maybe I could write something, which I couldn't, but maybe I could. I don't know how anybody sits down and like writes this. Like it blows my mind. It's crazy. Anyways, we can kind of get that. We'll let that slide into rhythm. With rhythm, which is focusing on the plotting and the pacing. So what did you score this out of 5?
So I scored this at a 4.7 out of 5. Overall, and this is one of those categories that like is harder to rate because let's say a book starts off a little slow, like kind of really has a hard time building up its momentum. How do you score or rate that? And this book is kind of one of those books. It does, if this is your first book, although probably it's your second, but if let's say it is your first, like how would you rate that? Because maybe it's like too slow for you, right? And that could be in some sense like a critique. But also in the other sense, like typically if something is slow to move, it's because there's a lot of it to move. And I think that's very, very true for Erikson's stories. And certainly for this story, there's a lot of characters to get off the ground in such a like a massive world in some senses being pulled together that there is this like big inertia to get it going. And so then the other side is, well, how well does that carry through the story and hit at the end? And I feel like Erikson really does do a great job of rewarding you for sticking through it over the course of the book. He has these pretty clear beats that he's going to hit to help drive the story forward. He has to switch between all these different characters, but I felt like he really, really managed that well. The only thing that I felt like warranted for me a lower score than let's say a 5 was just that with one of our main characters, there was a point kind of like in the last quarter where we're kind of bridging everything the character's done to like the very conclusion of the character. And granted, this was just like one character storyline of several ongoing storylines, where it's like I don't want to not be with the character because I do want to like see their journey, but at the same time, it didn't feel very significant what was happening in those moments. And if it had not been there, I would have wondered where the character went, but probably not noticed, honestly. Um,
We'll have
and
to
I
talk
don't
about
think it
that
really
for the
would have.
spoilers
Yeah,
because I'm
yeah,
curious.
yeah. I just don't think it really would have changed anything for me. And in terms of that character's like in terms of like the development of their story, it really just kind of felt like it was a vehicle to get them from point A to point B. And so for that, I would say about a 4.75. Because if that had been absent, the book would have been, let's say, shorter, and I probably wouldn't have noticed. But that's again the only reason I rated that a little bit lower.
Yeah, I'm at just a tick higher, 4.75. Um, I think the plot is a 5 out of 5 for me.
Mhm.
I think the story as a whole is like, I mean, perfection. Mwah. The pacing a little bit. It's interesting. I feel like once we got it, and you kind of nailed it. Like there's great payoff, and I think what's important about the payoff is it's not gimmicky. It's not like the author is intentionally hiding things from you to just be like gotcha at the end. It's not like that. It's just payoff that feels earned, uh, and is exciting and not a gotcha way, which I think is hard to do, and I think that's why I appreciate it a lot more. But I did feel, and I think this is the intent of Erikson, is I felt exhausted as I made it through this book. I just felt tired. Again, like I said, I do think that is the intention, especially with one of the storylines. Like and if you had watched our discussions, then you'll kind of hear me say like, man, this really like goes on, and this part goes on, and like once I reached the end, I understood why. I got it, and I think retroactively, I don't have a problem with it. But I think it does start with there's just a lot of moving storylines, a lot of moving pieces, and I found myself at times a little confused. But I don't know if I would cut that much. Just it's a 4.75. I'm talking about like it's bad. It's not. It's really good. I think that just my reading experience of it, for some of it, I just felt, just exhausted. I couldn't read a ton of it at a time. So it made it not quite as readable for me just because which again, not a bad thing. There are certain, there's tons of media out there that you need to take in small chunks and digest. And I think this book is better because of that. It's better for it. But it's not perfect for me. So 4.75 out of 5. All right, and let's go into the final category, which is F for feeling. So what did this book make you feel? How did it make you feel? Did it make you feel anything at all? And I'll kick us off. 5 out of 5 for me. I mean, the emotional impact of this book was insane. Like, there's been very, very few books that I've read where I'm just sitting there reading at the desk with like Breeze in the other room, like, oh my gosh. I'm like, Bree, I have to tell you about this. Like, I'm in shambles, but I can't because I want to. I'm like, I can't wait to reread this with you. I can't wait. Like, it's just elicited such a reaction out of me, and I think because going back to the last point, because I had felt so exhausted throughout it, that when everything came to a head and those moments hit, it was like a wave of not even relief, but just like emotion. Good and bad. I think there's sad moments, there's joyful moments. I laughed. Like, I think Erikson's like way more funny than I would imagine that he would be. When I think about this book as a whole, of like what type of emotions does it elicit, humor and joy, I wouldn't say are the forefront, but it's in there for sure. And I think the whole range of emotions, he covers it and nails it. So 5 out of 5 for me.
5 out of 5 for me for sure. And it's so funny. When we were first discussing this like review system, it was always really funny for me because we definitely have like different approaches to like the F category, which I think is really cool. Matt's always like focused on the emotional impact. Whereas like the first thing that always comes to mind for me is what is the thing that I want to remember about this story?
How does
like,
the physical book feel?
Yeah. Actually, it's these pages are nice.
5 out of 5.
It's that good paper. It's correct. It's well bound.
Yeah.
No. So yeah, I always think about like what is the thing that like, I want to remember? Like what do I feel like the story like wants me to remember? And for me, like this is one of those stories where when I close that book after finishing it, I feel an overall sense of like inspiration. Like I just read about a hero's long journey. And that's like, it feels like there's like this sense of like importance. Like I need to remember this, right? Like this is one of those things where, if age is old, right, you would be telling the story to like the future of the village around the campfire kind of thing. Like if this had been somebody in your history, like you would continue to tell the story. It's like on the level of like the Odyssey, right? As a Greek epic tale, it's like, because that was like an oral tale supposedly that Homer would tell. is kind of like on the par of that. And that's the sense that I got from this. And what's crazy, it's like it's not even necessarily the person that you thought it was going to be, which is just another really cool thing too. And so he has a way of just like raising characters up to this like level of grandeur. And and so when I close that book, I will say that in terms of like that level of exhaustion, I'm glad that we're taking a short break before we start the next one. I mean, also because I just had a kid too, but like there definitely was that level of exhaustion of like I need to like take a little bit before we open up the next one. Like I need to sit with this. And part of that is that like epicness that it's like we shouldn't just binge this like a TV show. We should
Yeah.
This needs a moment, right? And I just think that that was a really really cool thing. Even if this was like the only story like I read from like Book of the Malaz and let's say, I would be very very happy with like remembering this story
Yeah.
across all like the fantasy stories that I've read and things like that. Just like this one, like felt like it needed to be read, needed to be remembered. So 5 out of 5 for sure.
Awesome. Yeah. It is interesting. I feel like I should also adopt that adopt that F. Or incorporate it into mine because yeah, I agree. I think that's an important thing to talk about.
Yeah.
But yeah, let's go into our final. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just saying, but the feelings thing. It's like it is important to like talk about the emotional impact. It's just it's
Yeah,
I'm one of
emotional
those, like,
impact is just
stereotypical-
important to me. Like if I watch or read something and it makes me feel nothing, then usually it means I just didn't connect with the book, and that hurts. I'm trying to think of like media that I've loved that I didn't find myself connecting with, and it just doesn't exist. So it's like I gotta connect with it. The author has to make me connect with it in some way. But
Yeah,
I
it's just-
agree. I mean,
I'm
when I
one of
closed
those,
the book, it really was one of those
yeah.
like I felt like it was like a life-changing book.
Yeah.
Which I've only felt that about one other book. So I think it's a hard thing to do. And I'm not going to tell you what that other book is.
Yeah,
Just
my
kidding,
wife.
it's not some stuff.
Yeah, my wife and I will talk about this a lot because I can definitely fall into one of those like stereotypes of people that tends to be far more analytical and kind of like ignore
I
the
feel
emotional
nothing.
impact. Yeah,
I've never cried in my life.
but we were watching The Pit recently, and there's this scene where after like it's like a dramatic moment, he has to like give a speech to the entire ER, and he's like, I've had these conflicting moments too, and I went for a walk, and then I found a cemetery and of all mausoleums. I was like, that's what I need, a place to put these feelings. And then afterwards, he's like, why isn't my nurse or why isn't my other doctor talking to me? And she's like, are you serious? You just gave a speech titled How to Literally Bury Your Feelings. And you're wondering why no one wants to talk to you about their feelings?
Yeah, that's amazing.
And I'm like, I think I could fall into that category sometimes.
I'm like I'm such a baby. If there's like, if there was a score playing alongside of reading books, I'd cry all of the time. I mean, there are still books that make me cry without it, but like I'm one of those people that now, and I didn't used to be like this, but now like those like I hate them. They're so dumb. They're stupid like car commercials, but they play that sad song, and I'm like, it gets me, man. Music just like it just affects me. So
hey, you're the musician. That's what you need to do. You need to put together a score of like things you should listen to as you read through the chapters of Malazan. Also, I apologize, you guys hear dogs. My wife's coming home with the kids.
Need to put them on a chain or something. Get it? Just kidding.
You guys seem to have a chain of dogs.
Yeah, it was a chain of dogs joke, but it was a pretty bad one. All right, let's get into our score and sell. No more jokes, Ian. So, sorry. I'm wondering if I need to turn off notifications here. How do I do this? Mute.
Yeah, there's just a Windows mute button you could use, like a focus mode. I don't know if that interrupts.
Well, I don't.
recording.
Yeah, I just need to mute notifications, so because it's still picking up your audio. I can't remember if my notifications come through or not. Hopefully they don't. And if they don't, then they never happen. So into score and sell. So we're just gonna give the average of our 4 scores and then pitch the book. So my average of the 4 scores was like 4. I think it was like 4.81. We round up to the nearest 0.25. Even if we didn't round up to the nearest 0.25, this is one of those books that I feel like regardless, like I left this book thinking it's a 5 out of 5. It is a life-changing book for me. One of the best books, tied for the best book, if not the best book I've ever read. I will never forget this book. I immediately can't wait to. I just want to like share it with other people. And yeah, I just it's a easiest 5 out of 5. And then as far well, why don't you give your score and then we'll pitch it.
Yeah. Yeah, so mine averaged out to a 4.8 as well. So again, I'm kind of in the same camp here as Matt. It just feels like if you were to arrange a bunch of like top books, especially like top fantasy books, and we were arguing over them like, oh, this is a 4.8, 4.9, 5.0, we would be arguing over like 5 top fantasy books and like the S tier of fantasy books. And it would just get to that point of like, you'd be spending too much time like nitpicking where things go because at the end of the day this is in that upper echelon of reads. So I very much say like if I had to say like what are your top 5 books, what are your 5 out of 5 books, like this easily fits in the category as a must read for top fantasy. Yeah, and I'm super glad that I've read it, and I can't wait to be able to read more. So
Yeah. So pitch it. Who is this book for? I think, yeah, I agree. Most fantasy readers should read this. I don't think it's for everybody, for sure. If you have like you said, if you're not okay with soft magic, not everything is going to be explained. A lot of things aren't going to be explained. He does not hold your hand at all, and you have got to be okay with trusting the process. You have to be. He's not going to hold your hand. He's not going to give you some of the answers. You just have to intuit things or just be okay with, the world feeling like it's an alive world. So you've got to be okay with that. If you hear those things and you're like, well, I want those things, I still think you should try it. I mean, if you've read Gardens of the Moon, this is for the people that have read Gardens and just want to know if Deadhouse is worth it. You should. I think this is a step up, personally, from Gardens, just overall as a story. I think if you make it to the end of this book and you're like, then, I mean, I haven't read the rest of Malazan, but I would say you probably can jump off because it's probably just Steven Erikson's writing and storytelling. But yeah, that's I'd say if you're okay with soft magic and you want good character work and you want a really lived in world, you gotta try it. Especially if you've read Gardens, you gotta try it.
yeah, for me, this is just one of those books that is like for me like true fantasy. And I say one of those books. I really don't think there's actually that many, or at least I haven't come across that many. I think this is really true fantasy. If you're, and I know this may be a bit like controversial, or maybe not the way I would approach it. Matt and I've had this conversation many times, but I'm a huge fan of Lord of the Rings. And honestly, when I compare Lord of the Rings to a lot of the fantasy I've read today, for me, it's hard to say that a book like Lord of the Rings would be fantasy. Like when I think about things like the Redwall series, or for example, Mistborn, or things like Ranger's Apprentice, or like Sorcerer's Apprentice, or like all these off-the-shelf fantasy books, or even great fantasy books I've read, I'm like, this other thing is like characteristically different because there is an epic tale that's being told. It's not just that there's magic. It's not just that there's like other creatures, or there's shape shifting, or there's other worlds. Like there's like an epic, right? Like there is everything from a peasant to gods, right? There's magic, which could be as harmless as just a light, or as destructive as like shaping the land, ripping apart realms, right? Like there is grand tales of heroism and tragedy and death. And it just like it puts it so on par with all of the grand epic mythos, right, that have like carried our cultures through the millennia. It just feels like Erikson and Tolkien and many of the other authors are doing the same thing, are accomplishing something that's just characteristically different than a lot of these other fantasy books. So I would certainly say that if you're someone who can be okay with, a story where there will be many different characters and many different threads, and not all of them are going to be closed because life just isn't that clean. And you want to read about an epic tale of like grand adventure, like this is something you need to read.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, I mean, who knows? I could hate Memories of Ice. I mean, I don't think I'm going to, but this does really feel like it's got more than any other. I'm still relatively new to reading fantasy and just reading in general. Just learned how. But I do think this feels like 50 years from now, this is going to still be relevant and talked about and considered a classic. I just I struggle to see how it couldn't be, other than it does have that barrier of entry. I could see people falling off Gardens before they get to, it's an interesting world where there's a lot of instant gratification for a lot of media and things like that. And I think this is just not going to give you that, period. And if that's the type of media you want to consume, that's totally cool. But this is not going to, I could see you falling off this. But yeah, so 5 out of 5s for both of us. Great book. I mean, insanely good book. So now we are going to just quickly say, I think after each book in the review, after we barfs, then we're going to just currently, what is our current ranking of the books that we have read? So up to this point, we've read Gardens of the Moon, and we read Deadhouse Gates. So for me, my ranking from favorite to least favorite is Deadhouse Gates has now become my favorite, and Gardens of the Moon is now, that sounds bad saying least favorite, but it's like the other one, under Deadhouse Gates. So 1 Deadhouse, 2 Gardens.
Yeah, and I've been thinking about this a lot. For me, it's very, very hard. There are, I think overall, if I have to talk about it in terms of a book, in terms of its pacing, world building, then I think that Deadhouse Gates has done significantly more than Gardens. I mean, granted, there are certain things that we, in a way, kind of rely on Gardens doing, but I think overall, honestly, if you'd be willing to just accept that, like, oh, there's this type of magic system, and oh, there's this kind of place, like, you probably don't need Gardens as much for the kind of world building that's happening here. I think that would definitely put it into the top. I will say, in terms of characters, there's certain things about Gardens that were just so great. And I think in many ways I fell in love with the whole cast of Gardens more so than I fell in love with the whole cast of Deadhouse Gates. There are 2 characters for me in Deadhouse Gates that really jumped high up there. But in terms of like my top 10 characters, granted I know several of the characters in this story are also in Gardens of the Moon, but like some of my top cast is like still from Gardens. And I'm also, this is slightly subjective, but like Gardens also has like one of the coolest swords of all time. So yeah. I'm a little shallow as a fantasy sometimes. I'm like, give me cool swords and you've got me. Like, you've got me for life.
Yeah, I will say Gardens definitely has a much higher cool factor than Deadhouse. Like, if we're just talking like times I'd read it something and be like, wow, like what the heck, that was awesome. Like Gardens I think would top it. Yep. But just as a cohesive story, I think Deadhouse. And it, we talked about it already. It made me feel things. Gardens didn't really necessarily make me feel much. And you don't feel anything at all, so
I love that. It made me feel things.
It made me feel things. I'm a little baby.
No.
Whatever, I'm not your friend anymore.
Yeah, and I think that there is just like, if somebody was like, okay, you're stuck on a desert island, you can pick one of these 2 books. I would say that like there is a degree to which Deadhouse Gates gives you that epic, that sense of purpose, a sense of heroism, and it's definitely, like I said, something to be remembered. So I think overall, in terms of the series so far, that probably takes the top place as a book. But yeah, definitely the Gardens, like I think that from what you've told me, I haven't looked into as much. Matt's a lot more knowledgeable, like other booktubers and like where the temp is. I haven't really looked into that as much, but there was I heard that people were saying like Deadhouse Gates is like so much better than Gardens, or like Gardens is like the worst book. If Gardens is the worst book, then I expect every single book to be like a 4.8 to 5,
Yep.
And I think that there's like, again, it's like not that big of a difference, like wouldn't be that big of a disparity. I think that the characters were just so good and the cool factor was so high for Gardens that I think it's always just going to hold a very, very high ranking. Again, for me, still kind of like in that S tier of books for fantasy.
Yeah. Well, awesome. And we'll talk a little bit more about this maybe when we get to the series review. Like normal, we are going to epically fail at hitting a time that we had planned.
Where are we at right now?
We said 45 minutes.
Yeah.
We're at 40 minutes.
We got this. 5 minutes.
5 minutes spoilers and series review. and we can keep spoilers somewhat limited because if you are interested, before if you've not read the book, then you should sign off here in a second. But if you've not read the book and now you are interested and you decide to read it, then we invite you to check out our discussions if that's something that intrigues you. After each book within the book or part, we just do a 2-hour discussion on what's happened and what the hell everything means and how we're feeling. So a lot of our spoilers are going to be there. A lot of this is just going to be kind of regurgitated. So we can keep it brief-ish. We probably won't because we're awful at doing that. But let's get into spoilers. So we'll kind of just go back through the B.A.R.F, trudge through the B.A.R.F, if you will. And yes, spoilers. So if you've not read Deadhouse Gates, get out of here. Or watch through the spoilers if you want, but I wouldn't.
Mm-hmm. Or if you have, then put on your poncho because things about to get messy.
Ew. All right, so let's start with let's just start with characters. So we didn't really take too many notes here. We're kind of just going off the cuff because we've talked about it before. I think some fun things would just be favorite characters, least favorite characters for the whole thing. Let's start there. Or if you have anything to say before that.
No, I think it's a great place to start.
Okay.
Yeah.
Kick us off then.
Okay. Well, so and this kind of factors into like my believable. Also, kind of goes into again sort of my discussion of like Gardens of the Moon versus Deadhouse Gates. In terms of characters, I absolutely loved. Right. I mean, like being able to follow like Mappo and Akarium through their story. I was interested in them from the beginning all the way through. I think they were some of the coolest characters that I got to read about in this, and I just wanted to keep learning more and more and more about them. That makes it's easier with them having a mystery behind them and a complicated dynamic. Like again, I could keep reading about them forever, Other than that, being able to stay with Duker, I think the historian perspective was just so cool. And then overall, and I know this kind of gets into like that appeal factor, but what he was able to accomplish with Coltane, taking a character that we basically knew nothing about, and then to like elevate him to really, in many ways, being the point of this story.
Yeah.
Right. I think it's just a feat that is well deserved, well earned, and like really like it is like a feat worth applauding. It was absolutely a masterpiece in terms of writing. So those are all really awesome. There are other characters, of course, like Kalam and Fiddler that have been developed as a part of the story. Absalar has been developed as part of the story. So these are some like really awesome characters. There, of course, were also characters that I think for me are just totally forgettable. Like Manala, cool that we have a love interest for Fiddler, but ultimately it's not really important for the plot or the story. To say Fiddler, Kalam, right?
Yeah,
so
yeah,
she's
Kalam.
So, but she's not really like overall that important for the story. You mentioned this, but I was on the same page with you as well. The Red Guards, specifically those that were following in Kalam's wake, really, again, just not really that important. Yeah, they're cool. They killed the Shaikh, but like ultimately,
I think my biggest problem with it was just they were set up to be. It felt like we were following them. It was interesting. She was on his trail. I can't remember her name, but she's hot on his trail. They make it to Arin, and then she just gets arrested. And
it's off scene too, I think, right? Or maybe it was like on scene, but
I think we see her like get arrested, but it just kind of it just kind of fizzled. Which I don't know if that is so much a. I would still say she felt like a believable character. Not as like fleshed out. If anything, maybe that's like a plot problem. Like I wish that maybe had a better resolution. But yeah, I would agree. I think she was probably my least favorite. If we're not talking about cast.
Yeah, Carpelan Dimasand, the traveling merchant who comes to help out. Kind of an interesting factor for the story as a whole. Certainly has like kind of challenged sort of maybe some of my expectations about how things might work in the world. And overall, kind of interesting. But again, if it had never happened, I probably again wouldn't notice. I think that there are sort of important plot points that he introduces, like giving things to Coltrane, ultimately then going to Duker, and that certainly has created some intrigue for the next story. Like I really want to see what happens with Duker moving forward. Now that we know his like presumably know his like soul has been put into a vial, perhaps, or there's some possibility for resurrection or something. But I thought ultimately, though, like he may be a vehicle for this, and that might be important. But as a character, for me, it just like wasn't. It didn't really hit. And then this isn't really a character thing, so maybe leaves for later. But just overall, like the whole boat traveling with Kalam, which I guess kind of again feeds into it, is just like you're kind of also seeing me mention a lot of characters kind of featured in his story. I think that his rhythm was like the worst, in my opinion, of all the storylines. And so
Yeah, I would
yeah.
agree. We didn't talk about Fellison and
Yeah.
Cole.
Well, so I mean, Fellison, I hated, but rightfully so.
Yeah, to me, like,
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of Fellison hate out there. I
Hmm.
think there's also some Fellison love. I think she's not my favorite character that I'm like, hell yeah, Fellison. But, like, I think she is, like, if I had to say who I thought is objectively the best written character in the book, I think it's her. I mean, I think she's just such a well written character. It's crazy. Yeah, I mean, I was frustrated as hell with her, just like you're supposed to be. Um, but that's just like loving a good villain, right? I wouldn't say she's the villain, but a villain is a bad guy, but like I still love them if they're compelling. And I think I found her really compelling, if not sometimes teetering on the edge of like believable, for certainly believable with everything she's gone through, but exhaustive. I was like, oh, I'm like, come on, you stupid teenager girl. Like, these people are helping you, but
Hmm.
like, I think that's just the kind of the brilliance of Erickson's writing. So, yeah, I would say, I'm trying to think of by the end. Yeah, I mean, he was the one. I think it
Hmm.
had to be Duker. Yeah, I'll never forget that through line of what the story was. I'm trying to think of like main cast, like Fiddler, Callum, Duker, and like Fellison. Really, of those four, those are kind of like the four like main, and Mappo Nakirium, which I do love them as well. I would say I wasn't quite as intrigued from the very beginning because I was just like, who? Like who are like as I learned them more and got to really attach myself to their like friendship and brotherhood, and by the end, kind of similar to Duker. Just like at first, I was like, yeah, I like them. I mean, they're good, interesting characters. And by the end, I'm like, I'll never forget you. I'll never forget you, Duker. and yeah, Map on a Karen. I mean, that is just the way he writes that friendship is so good. But least
Hmm.
favorite, it probably is Callum or Column or I just I agree. I think his whole storyline was the clunkiest, and just least interesting. Although still interesting. Just if I had to put some at the bottom, it felt just a little different than it felt almost like a video game. The whole time, it's just like move from place to place, level up, and then yeah, the final John Wick battle, which was it sounds like I'm being negative, but still really liked it. But I would find myself be like, I can't wait to get back to like Fellison, and by the end, I'm just like, I just need the chain of dogs. Like everything else put aside, I need to know how
Yep.
this resolves.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, I'm trying to think of any other like real characters. I mean, great character deaths that I didn't see
Yeah.
coming. Culp, I hope it's not the end for Culp. I think it is.
Yeah. I think
Um,
so.
and then I'm totally blanking on. I have such a bad memory with names. With Fellison's, with the not the claw but the talon that was protecting her was with
Bottom.
Culp. Bawden, yeah,
Yeah.
Bawden's death too.
Hmm.
Ended up being pretty emotional right there at the
Yeah.
end.
Yeah,
So
and then that one definitely like hits harder than you think it would right off the bat because it's like, again, he feels more like an anti-hero if anything, right? So
it's kind of crazy to me how, because even like when he starts to like basically sacrifice himself, and you're like, oh, he's not gonna make it through this scene. I still was just like, oh yeah, he's not gonna make it through the scene. And then when you get like the like final thoughts and that, just like in a paragraph, I was like, oh no,
yeah.
like I care. So yeah, I think character work is great, dialogue great, pushed. I mean, talk about comic relief that
Yeah.
just works. Like it
Hmm.
just works. So yeah, anything else on characters and their believability?
No, I think the last thing I would just say on in terms of believable characters is that it is also just a very wide range. And I think that is, I mean, that is really, really cool. There's a lot of characters in here, but they all do feel unique. If you were to line them all up, they would all still stand out
Yep.
in their own way. Maybe they don't stand out like significantly, right?
I would even say
But I
most of
mean,
them do stand out pretty
yeah,
significantly.
yeah. But I mean, even from like, I mean, like this is one of the things I was thinking about as you were kind of going through some of the characters. Like you mentioned, Kalam's sort of John Wick moment, and you know, there's like the crotchety lady who has like the bloodhound that like goes after the rat. He's like she has like the rat catcher dog.
Mm,
Um, and like I don't know why she stuck out in my memory, but then I got to think of like how many like crotchety like peasant women do we have in this story? Like he doesn't even reuse like those common archetypes that often,
yeah.
right? It's just like, you know, how many barkeepers do you see? How many like grumpy like tavern dwellers do you see, or tavern, you know, tenants do you see? It's just like he doesn't reuse like the same kind of character that much.
Yeah.
Um, and and like, especially for such a big world and like such a big book and like so many different storylines, it's very cool. How well he's able to sort of dip into the well of available character stories and types and you know, presentations.
And a lot of it's through dialogue too, which
Hmm.
it just continues to like impress me how
Yeah.
well he can do it through dialogue.
Yeah. I mean, I could actually tell you why I remember the crotchety old lady, just because. So he like Columb's like hiding out on the top, like the top floor,
Hmm.
and the dog like gets like vaulted on the
Yeah,
top
like
floor.
throws the dog down,
Yeah.
right?
And then it like hits the street, and then she's like, "What are you doing out there? Like, come on back!" I'm like, "You just your dog's just like lunch," and you're like, "What are you doing? Like, come on, get back inside."
Yeah.
And I was okay, like I've had a dog. Okay, so this is a story of mine where when I was in fourth grade, we were building a lake house, and the roof had not been installed yet, but only the framing for the second floor. And you've been to my lake house, so you kind of know
Hmm.
the first floor is all together, but the second floor is being framed. So the stairs, second floor was all open. There's no doors or anything. And we go up there, and my dog's with us. And for whatever reason, my mom is like outside, and she's like, Looper, come here, bud.
Oh
And he
no.
just like takes one look in her direction and then just leaps off the second floor, and he hits the ground and he goes, doop. And like I kid you not, like he's breathing, but he is paralyzed like this, like all fours, like
What have I done?
stiff as a board. And my mom picks him up, and he just stays stiff, and he's like this, you know, like 90-minute drive home. This dog is just like
Oh
this.
my
We're
gosh.
like, this dog's like probably brain dead or something. Like I don't know what's wrong with him because he won't move. We get home, she opens the door, and he just leaps out of the car, and then just starts running around over the place. For like, I
Okay.
guess he's fine. Like,
Yeah.
you know, but
That's
like,
hilarious.
I will never forget like our mannequin-looking dog for like 90 minutes.
That's crazy.
Any,
Yeah.
anyway, so silly story, but when the the rat catcher got launched up, I had a personal chuckle during that
Yeah, no.
moment.
That's great. Yeah, I thought real quick before we move into and normally for the spoiler section we're not going to cover everything. Like there's not spoiler pros that we're going to talk about. I don't think. So it's usually like that period though. Oh, it's crazy in chapter whatever.
Yeah.
No, usually it's going to do with rhythm or
Mhm.
characters.
Oh, but man, when he used that ellipses or that M dash,
Mhm.
oh,
That made me feel something. Let me tell you. um, I think kind of just last thing I want to touch on for characters is like just expectations and how a single conversation specifically with Lacine at the very, very end. Just one conversation can make me completely change the way I feel about a character that I've been disliking for like 1,000 pages, and one conversation can just open up so much through dialogue. And and it's not just what she says, it's how she says it and the situation. And I think that is really just one of his strengths when it comes to character work.
I think Lacine and Shadow Throne are, for me, and I'll talk about this more later, but I think for me that is like the reason why I would want someone to read Gardens of the Moon before reading Deadhouse Gates.
That's a cool reveal that we get.
Yeah, and just
crazy reveal.
The whole sort of perspective difference that we get on Shadow Throne and Cotillion and Lacine through Deadhouse Gates, it hits so well because of Gardens. But I would say, like, honestly, I don't even think that you need to read Gardens for Fiddler or Kalam or Crocus or Absolar. It's just not, like, you really don't need to read it for them. Everything that happens with them, it basically
maybe Absolar. She's the only one I'd say, like, maybe.
I mean, it certainly helps, but, like, could I read Deadhouse Gates and just accept that she had been possessed by a god? Sure.
Yeah.
Moving forward, right? But like the whole thing with Lacine and Shadow Throne, and then even again Cotillion, it's just like, man, is that like awesome? Especially after Gardens.
It's crazy too, because like when you think about Deadhouse and like what it means it feels so epic, but really like it's almost it's not insignificant by any means in like the large scope of things, but like it's kind of not as important. We learn that this whole book and what's happening in this book is kind of like a speck until we zoom out and we're like, here's what's really going on. This was just a small little like a scuffle in the large conflict, but it feels so important. And I think that I love that. Like you kind of almost forget that there is like Shadow Throne, Lacine, and like the big bad that's kind of been revealed to us. I can't remember what they it's not Kaladin Brood, but I can't remember what they're called. Who they're uniting against back on Darujistan or Tajikistan. I can't remember. But who they're working with their enemies against this big bad that's coming. So it is crazy that like this small little thing that happened on this other continent, it's like, really, when you think about it, like what are the significant things? Like they wanted to save Coltane because he's a good commander.
Mm-hmm.
Important. Everything really with like Fiddler and Callum. Like I'm trying to think of like what are going to be the consequences really of Callum not. I mean, he doesn't kill Lacine. He just kind of just goes on a journey. There's like. There's going to be that conflict between Felicin and her sister, Tavor.
Mm-hmm.
But in the large scale of things, I just don't think it's as important. It's almost like just a distraction, which is I just find that interesting because it doesn't feel like it when you're reading it. It feels like there's never been anything more important than this. This chain of dogs is everything, but really it's kind of not. Or maybe it will. Maybe we'll find out, and it is. But it's just like more of like a man. I'd really like to hang on to him. He's a good one. Mm-hmm. But we're like, nothing can happen.
Yeah. Well, I think that's something that we're being invited into in a way. And really there was this theme in Gardens of the Moon too, is like, I mentioned it several times, like there's this chess match going on. Like Lacine is constantly moving the pieces. And while we are very focused on like this moment and this time, it's only one place on the board. It's only one of the things happening on this board. I was checking our notes. I think it was called like the Panion Dominion or Panion Domin.
Yep.
But yeah, there's this other thing going on back where we were with Gardens of the Moon. And so again, this is just like one moment in time. It's one story happening.
So it's like a chapter in a history book.
Yeah, but it's a part of the history of one world and along many realms. And there's lots of other things going on at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And it's easy to feel like this is like the most epic thing happening right now, but it may not be.
Yeah.
which is also just kind of crazy.
Yeah. It's nice too that I think a lot of fantasy that I've read, it kind of feels self-contained, and like when we get to the end of this conflict, it's like the bow will be tied and I will not care about the future of what happens. But I just feel like this, I do care. I care about the larger scope, and yeah, it really does just feel like this week we learned about the Seven Cities part in the Malazan Empire history. And now we're going to keep going and learn about what was the next part of their history. And I think that just makes it feel more lived in and like a real history than just like an author telling me a story.
Yep.
But any other, I mean, man, we've talked about so many. Do you have like a favorite like part? We don't. I think most people watching this, if you're interested in our like deep thoughts and like really breaking everything down, well, go watch our discussions on 5 times speed, because they are long, admittedly, but
Yeah. So, because we kind of have like jumped across from all of them. There are a few things I'd like to say about like his writing prose.
yeah.
In terms of a favorite part,
Now you covered the ellipses already.
yeah, I covered the ellipses already. Yeah, because I was kind of talking about like the things that went into my review of the characters, which also kind of hit my review of rhythm as well. Overall, I think Kalam's like pacing just wasn't on the same level, I would say, as the rest of the storylines.
Yep.
But that's really all I have to say about that. Favorite part, I mean, I still think the one that hits me is the one where they killed the simp god. That was just there's just something about that. Like it's definitely not the most like
Simp God?
yeah, the simp god. The simp it wasn't a simp god? I thought it was a simp god. SEMK, I can't ever say that correctly. But it's like the battles were really, really cool, and like especially some of the final ones.
The river
like,
battle.
The river battle was crazy. I mean, that one hit really hard with everything that's going on, and I talked about that in our video about it too. Just like for world building and lore, like it's so cool. Just how it was the nobles being exploited to make all that happen. But I would say that overall, I think one of my favorite parts is still there's just something really kind of crazy and like almost a little comical, if you will, about these guys having gone through like this epic battle, and then your historian here has like gotten like 2 hours of sleep, and then they're like waking him up, and they're like, basically, hey, you need to come with us because we need you to witness this. And then they're like, hey, what am I doing here? They're like, well, we kind of feel like we need to make sure to like root out the powers of the simp. And he's like, yeah, I think that's the wisest thing to do. He's like, okay, cool. So now we're gonna go kill their god.
Yeah.
He's like, what? And like he's just like, next thing you know, he's being transported. This god's being ripped apart. Like gore is being flying all over him. And he's like, I didn't ask for this. And then he comes back, and then the nobles are like walking up, like, we gotta talk to you. And he's like, blood is like dripping off of him, and he's like, not now.
Yeah,
Like, it's just it was such a cool moment for me, and for me that's like I mentioned it when we had read past that of like talk about just upping the stakes of this, of like we just saw a god die.
Yeah.
I'll put that in air quotes, die.
Die.
Right. And that's just it was really cool.
Yeah. There's so many cool moments. I guess I wanted to just touch on why I dinged it a little bit on rhythm. I think Callum, you're spot on. Like the whole boat thing, I liked it, but I don't think there was much consequence to it. It could have really been taken out, and that would have been okay. And this comes from someone that like I love me some boat stuff, I guess. Like the Culp boat stuff, I'm here for that. That stuff was great. But yeah, the Callum stuff, while it was so good and I enjoyed reading it, that did feel like it just served the purpose of getting him from point A to point B, which is fine. It was fine. But really, the exhaustion thing came from the Chain of Dogs. Really, like before I realized, in the beginning, I felt like Chain of Dogs was maybe my least favorite part. Whenever we'd get to the Chain of Dogs, I'd be like, all right, here we go. It's a 50-page battle. and like I'm tired. Like they're a little confusing, the battles. I mean, and then you kind of be like, and then you kind of realize like, oh, this is like there's gonna be, if you look at the front of the book, there's like the map of the chain of dogs, and like the X's are the battles, and there's like 10 X's, and I was like, oh boy, there's gonna be a lot of battles. And every time they get to a battle, I'd be like, all right, here we go. And they were enjoyable. They were good. I just didn't feel like, I don't know if I understood why or got the point, but then you get to the end, and I wouldn't have it any other way. I'm so glad I went through those exhaustive battles, because it made the ending of the Chain of Dogs what it couldn't happen any other way. Like, you have to suffer through that with them to feel that relief when they finally make it, and then the heartbreak when what comes after happens, which is just infuriating. With freaking was it Corbola? No, who's the freaking commander? It's not
That's
Malik Rowe,
Pormqual.
but Pormqual, man.
Pormqual, yeah, the High Fist.
Yeah, the worst. But
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to think of like other parts I really enjoyed. One part that really stood out to me was like the sappers, the Marines, when he like promotes the Marine.
Yep, that's so good.
Oh my gosh.
One of the best
Like,
comedic moments in the entire story.
yeah, and also like he sandwiches this in between these between like two like PTSD traumatic conversations, and it's brilliant. Like I just feel like that's so hard to do. He made me like sad, and then laughing, actively laughing, and then back to like, no, this is like dead serious. Like,
Yeah.
they are, this is war. And so I thought that was really, really impressive. I'm trying to think what else. All the Deadhouse Gates inside at the Azath House stuff was really, really interesting. But at the end, I think retrospectively or just like on the outside looking back, it really was the story of the Chain of Dogs. And like that's what's gonna sit with me. And, like, I'll never forget the Chain of Dogs.
Yeah, no, I agree. That's for me. Like, that became the centerpiece of the story. That became like the spine of the story. That's like everything connects to that. It just felt so cool. But yeah, I do think that like since we're talking about the Chain of Dogs, I think really that's maybe the best demonstration of prose, and like a lot of things that informed my perspective on his prose. He has a lot of battles in this one, and I know we talked this before. You're not always the biggest fan of like these lengthy battles, but I do think that it's interesting that you can have so many, but yet each one feels characteristically unique in its own right.
Yeah,
different stakes, different challenges, ways in which we can improve the stakes or up the stakes, which is crazy considering the fact that like everything's already on the line anyway. Told from different perspectives, different amounts of details. But like the battle where they go into the valley and they have to march uphill is a really great example of how a scene like that can play out with different degrees of prose. Like, he's very detailed in how he starts at like a high level perspective to bring in the stakes. So like going into a valley and people lining different sides, and then gets even more specific with like the march up the hill and where people are positioned to be firing and why they can't get a good angle when they're firing down, and the sappers like coming out of the earth, and then the charge up, and then like the horse like melting into wax basically. And then and then it kind of goes back to the assault on the actual group who were basically forming like a ring, and it's like talking about like, oh, we're back to like this high level, like it's breathing.
Yeah.
Right. And then at the same time, we also see this element of like people go around the flank to attack the refugees, and that's just left. It's like, oh, there they go. And then later on, we see the our own like was a Weasel Clan or whatever coming around, who've won the victory, right, against that group, and now they're flanking, and so it's just like it's just so incredible how Erikson with his prose and the way that he presents this, because when they're marching up the hill, he's not using these like illustrative or this these type of it's not almost metaphorical in a way, but he's not using that kind of language like breathing. It's very much this like trudge up the hill, and it's exhausting and scary and terrifying, and then when it gets back, it's like, ooh, right? It's like now we're very high level. We're using things that evoke feeling or that evoke imagery to help you understand what's happening, rather than like talking about the complexities of like this group moved and then they stepped back, this
Yeah.
other group moved, and so it helps us to have a perspective on the battle while letting things wash to the background and then back to the foreground. And so it was so, for me, it was like very impressive to read that and feel like even though this battle had such high stakes and happening on so many different fronts, I could get the gist of it, right? I could see where things were happening, what was important, what things needed to happen, or like what might decide the battle. And I could kind of like hone in on that. And I just think like, and there's many other examples, but I'm very impressed with how Erikson can like tell these, like, can write these scenes and tell these stories. It never feels like one consistent prose. It always kind of felt to me like the prose fit what was being shown, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, I love that.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. I didn't really recognize it while I read it, but as soon as you said, I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, yeah, it really was like that. So, and
Mm-hmm.
just I think, and maybe we can use this as a segue into like the series review section, which I'll let you lead off. But I think now that I've read both of these books, I can kind of I should have just trusted Erikson a little bit more. I think with you mentioned I'm not a big long drawn out battle guy, and I'm not a huge action guy in fantasy. Usually because it's one side who we as the reader are following against a lot of cannon fodder. And so like while there are still technically stakes there, I want to feel invested in like it's just like our heroes killing a bunch of people, these no names, and it's just like cool. Like I want to know what are the repercussions and like the consequences of this battle, and like the faster we get through the battle, the more I'll get to those consequences. But here I should have trusted him, because if I would have just looked back to Gardens of the Moon, he can write concise battles and has. So it's one of those like I think there is a point to be made. There's a reason why he made them so lengthy and exhaustive. I think it is very intentional. And so yeah, I'll be really interested to see going forward. Just more of a, I think Malazan as a whole is a very much a trust the process kind of thing, which I think mostly I'm good at doing, but like here, I think this was a perfect example of like I probably should have trusted the process a little more. But there's a part of me that I think I'm like kind of glad I didn't. Like I was never enough to where I'm like, I don't want to read this. But by the end, I was like, I'm so glad that like it's so cool to see that like my least favorite part, and now I'm like, no, like I'm glad it happened that way, because now I feel this way, and I don't know if I've really ever experienced that with something before. So I thought that was pretty cool. But yeah, why don't you kick us off into just generally what a series review? We didn't really talk about this before, but like, what do you mean by this? And yeah, tell me.
Yeah.
Tell me,
Yeah.
Papa.
So this is something I brought up that I really wanted to do as we read through these books, because I thought it might give something a little different, if you will, to our reviews that you wouldn't find like in a review of another book. I think when you're reading the series, it is important to think about the book as an individual, but also as a member of the series, because the Guards of the Moon and Deadhouse Gates are two books of a long series, and ultimately they should be contributing something to the development of that series. I think arguably we can see a lot of that in Deadhouse Gates. There are certainly open storylines now that I feel like, while there might be threads with characters that sometimes doesn't get resolved, and that's okay, there are very clear storylines here between Lysine, Shadow Throne, things like the demise of Duker, but also maybe not demise, Felison, and ultimately the Whirlwind and the Apocalypse. And these things they've developed a momentum. It's going to be carried into the next story. Really, Gardens of the Moon is kind of interesting in the fact that while it did give us a lot, it didn't really create that kind of momentum in the same way. Certainly, I was hoping for, what happens with, Dujek One Arm and the Bridge Burners. And we kind of get in a resolution to that. They've been outlawed, but really not in a way. And that's really cool. But like this has actually built momentum that is intended to be carried through. Like these are storylines I want to see continue. I want to know what's going to happen with these. And I don't feel like I can say that these are finished, right? Like I don't feel like Felison's storyline is resolved. And I don't feel like Deadhouse Gates, if it stopped here, I don't think Deadhouse Gates ultimately is providing us with a resolution for that storyline. And so I think that's a really, really neat thing. ultimately, for me, I think Deadhouse Gates very much is a story about Duker and Coltane. I think that is the key of it. And the rest of this is really helping us to fill out the world and ultimately build for a greater series. Now, I do think that, and I said this before, I really do think that you could view Deadhouse Gates as a book one with Gardens being a prequel. Now, I don't know what's going to happen with the next book, but I do feel like you could do that because this book really feels like it's the one establishing the momentum for the series.
Mm-hmm.
And I would still be happy with this as a book one. Like if somebody read this as a book one, they're like, I don't want to read anymore. I think they would still walk away pretty satisfied with reading Duker and Coltane's storyline.
Yeah.
And the cool factor that comes from like a carrying the Mappo and the Soul Taken Endeavors, like just has these really cool things about it. And so ultimately, I think that this has given something really important to the series to give us a launching point through the next books. And I think that is an amazing contribution, while at the same time still having significant elements to it that help it stand on its own, even if other things would be left unresolved.
Yeah. I think that's
I don't think the series. Yeah, sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm just gonna agree. I think that's what's most impressive is like if Steven Erikson wrote this and said no more, I'm done. He pulls a George. As much as I would have been intrigued about Felison and Tavor clashing and what's gonna happen with Malazan, I feel so satisfied with the Coltane. Like, yeah, it just becomes so clear that's the point. That is the point of this book, and like even if you lost the rest, it doesn't matter. I mean, it does, but you know what I mean. Like it doesn't,
Yep.
Which is hard to do. I think that's a reason why some of these unfinished series out there get so much. I mean, this probably would get a lot of flack too if it weren't finished, but like I don't know. It's just one of those. A series has to be a good series is made up of good stories. It can't just be, you can't just look at it as a whole. I don't think as a whole, if a lot of stuff happens and it's good, that's cool. But like a really successful series is a collection of stories that are all individually good, and because of that, make a really good overarching story. And yeah, I mean, I think if they're all like Deadhouse, I think we're in for like a real treat because, I mean, yeah, it's just like next level.
Yeah. So I think this story is absolutely pivotal, at least from what I'm seeing right now, like absolutely pivotal to the series. I think that this is really what is kind of in some sense like creating the series for us, and so I'm really excited to see how the next story and the story after that will continue to contribute to the series. But I think that even just on its own, Deadhouse Gate has positioned Tale Malazan, Book of the Fallen to be probably one of the best fantasy stories, certainly epic fantasy stories out there. So, which is just absolutely awesome. And like, what a way to really kick this off. And again, I mean, I think I personally really love Gardens. But Gardens does not contribute to the overall series in the same degree. I will say that is, if I had to be critical of Gardens in any way, like that is where the biggest disparity for me is between the two.
Yeah.
There's characters, there's stories, cool factors, things like that, and I just think that Gardens is really close on a lot of these elements, but it does not it does not do for the series like what Deadhouse Gates has done for the series.
Yeah, I'd agree. Which I'd be really curious to see if future books make it like make some of the things that happen more important. You know what I mean? Which I'm thinking it will, but yeah, just if we're separating that and we're just isolating Gardens, yeah, I would agree. I think that's the biggest knock on it, which, I think we both liked it maybe more than general public seemed to like it. Like I think you gave it, I can't remember what you gave it. I think I gave it a 4.5 or a 4.25 or 4.5. I really liked Gardens, and I was expecting to not, just based off of what everyone said, like, oh, it's the worst one. You just got to get through Garden so you can get to Deadhouse. And I was just like, all right. But then I was like, I really like this. Like, I really like it. So, yeah, very pleasantly surprised with that. And then, I don't know who this is for, but I just want to say it. A lot of people say, once you get to Deadhouse, you're good. Like, it gets really good. And, like, I just think that's, I think if you've, are willing to finish Deadhouse, I do agree. But I don't think the first book in Deadhouse is any easier to read than Gardens. It's just as confusing, just as complicated, just as dense. So I don't think if someone reads Gardens and like I really just didn't like how concentrated it all was, and I think if someone's like, well, just start Deadhouse, it's way different. I just don't agree with that. I think it felt, I don't know. I didn't feel like it was a big change for me. I felt like it was a more cohesive story altogether by getting the conclusion and wrapping it all up. I think overall, yes, but like, I mean, I'm just trying to think when I learned about Maponacarium, I was like, who are they? Where are we? Are we on a new continent? Like, there's different like tribes, and these are new races, and there's these divers, and like there's a path of like there's just as much going on in this one that is all new conceptually. So
Yeah.
I just found that interesting. I don't know. I'm not sure why that's like a general thing. I don't know if it's just to get people to just get them to dive in and hopefully they get hooked, but I didn't find this any like a significantly easier.
I don't think it is. And I'm sure there's probably people out there who might make the argument that maybe Gardens helps with that a little bit, but honestly, I really don't even think it does. I mentioned earlier that I think Gardens does a really good job at positioning like Lysine and Shadowthrone and Cotillion for this big reveal in Deadhouse Gates, which is what makes it really, really awesome. I mean, if I had read Deadhouse before reading Gardens, I wouldn't get the 180 on Lysine in the same way that, like, we kind of see through Callum's eyes.
Mm-hmm.
By reading Gardens first, we get that, which was so awesome. But when you think about the things that like Gardens is helping you to understand, like Fiddler, Absolar, Crocus, you don't need it for that.
Yeah.
These characters will stand on their own. Warrens, honestly, like if you actually think about it, Warrens are not that important to this story.
Yeah.
We spend time in one, but honestly, the fact that we spend time in one kind of tells you everything you need to know about it.
Yep.
We should spend more time in more than one. And it's like I don't think that you really need it. Magic is actually not as present or prevalent in this because we don't see it through the eyes of like Tattersail like we did in the first one. So it's like really Gardens had a lot of things that it introduced conceptually, and Deadhouse probably has more, really. Because like we also have like what's the difference between Soul Seekers and Divers, and like how do Warrens different than Old Gods? What is this like warlock magic that's being used, and how does that work, right? And so there is
Heberick?
a lot
We never
conceptually.
talked about Heberick. Sorry to interrupt you, but like what the hell is happening to Heberick? His hands and like
his ghost hands. He's changing. He's got like beast fur.
Yep, we have
He's
just
like
as many
tattoos
races
glow.
because we've got the Talani Moss. We've got the oh my gosh, what is Mappo and Icarium?
Trells, Jagoots.
Jagoots, yeah. So they're back.
Yep.
Jagoots are back. We learn more about their history. There's also like the Talani Moss adjacent.
Yep.
They were on like the ship with Culp in the Warren.
No, the ship.
I can't remember what they're called.
Yeah.
But,
you still have to know about Drujistan a little bit, right? You still have to know about the free. Now we're learning about the free cities and all the different tribes, and then you're being introduced to these crows and their different tribes, and like I mean there really is a lot. I don't know that this one is really giving you less that you have to be concerned with. I think it very much both. I think all of Erikson's books are probably they're going to ask you for trust.
Yep.
You just have to trust that it'll be worth it in the end. Have that faith.
Yep. Oh man, I just had a thought, but I lost it. I don't remember.
Maybe the crows will take it and bring it back.
Maybe. Yeah. Well, unfortunately, the video's over, so we'll never know. Oh man, what the hell was it?
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember. All right. Well, that's okay. So,
So,
any final closing thoughts?
Yeah. Yeah. So I will just say because I mentioned it several whole times. I would just say like as a final closing thought, I think that even though I would say things like you could treat Gardens as a prologue, I think that Erikson really has contributed something unique from each of these books, which I think is really cool. I think Gardens provides something unique to the story overall, the series overall, and I think that Deadhouse Gates provides something very unique to the story overall. And there are things to love about each of them in their own right that aren't necessarily in the other one. And I'm sure that there are people out there who might prefer a strong level of consistency, like a high level of consistency between stories. And when I think about the fantasy stories I've read, the series I've read, there's a lot of consistency. Like Ranger's Apprentice, for example, which is one of the ones I loved reading in high school, lots of consistency. You every book you read, you knew what you were getting, right, throughout the entire book. And I feel like I know what kind of writing I'm going to get. I don't necessarily know what I'm going to get.
No,
right?
yeah, he's proven there's no way. There's no way. Which makes it really fun to make predictions because they are just throwing a dart. Yeah, you're just throwing a dart. And then being like, I knew it. I knew it.
Yeah, and so it's one of those where it's like you almost like want to throw a dart at a dartboard with a bunch of blank note cards you'll fill in later, so you can then say, "Yeah, I called it.
Yep,
I called it."
It was all right there.
Yeah, exactly. Because if you try to predict beforehand, then you're probably gonna get it wrong.
Yeah, it's fun though.
Unless you just which makes it really fun. And it's just like it's very awesome that you can do that. So overall, I think that is a real strength of his, and I'm very excited to see how each one going to contribute something of its own right to the series. But so far, I think these stories have established a really, really good baseline. And if this continues, it would be very hard to see how any fantasy series, if you will, could really stand above Malazan.
Yeah, I agree. I do remember what I was going to say, and I'll just briefly say it, which was kind of just talking about the series as a whole. I found it really fun that in Gardens we were on a single location, and then book 2, Deadhouse, we really zoomed out and went to a whole. We're covering a continent, and not even the same continent, a different continent. So now I'm really interested to see where Memories of Ice goes. Like where in the scope of things are we going? Are we gonna go back to like? Because there's a lot of moving pieces now. Are we going to go back to like Darujistan and like be in a centralized location again, or are we going to be in all of Genebakis, or are we going to be bigger than that, Genebakis and 7 cities or more? I don't know. So I'm really curious to see where that's going. But overall, I agree. I mean, I just can't see, especially with people saying, it is just general consensus Gardens is the worst. And I'm like, if that is the worst, then this is going to be my favorite series. It just. Because nothing even, there are things that I love, but it's just so next level that I just can't see it going any other way. So let's briefly just say what our plans are for the future. So as of today, recording this, it's the 26th of July. This will probably not go up till next week. I think we are both planning on starting Memories of Ice on August 1st. It is a much bigger book than Deadhouse. Luckily, from here on out, all of the Malazan books or novels all of them are broken into 4 books. So we're going to keep the same style where we will read book 1 and then book 2 and then book 3 and then book 4 and do a discussion for each of those. But as the books get longer, we may just take a little bit more time. So I would say you can expect the first video by the end of August. Hopefully week 3-ish, but we'll see just when we can get to it and record. But I think that's realistically where we're going to land is 2 to 3 weeks per part. I think that's probably what you can expect, a month on the longer side, and that's just going to be a nice pacing for us with breaks in between each novel, kind of like we did for this, just so we can really digest it and also read some other things that we're wanting to read and do all of that. So any notes there?
No, I think that captures it really, really well. And so it should be pretty manageable. There will be, as we are going into August, like Matt said, we'll be starting pretty soon. There'll be like I said, like Matt said, kind of 3rd or 4th week. Matt has a typically very consistent schedule, although he does have busy seasons. And then for me, we're transitioning back into school, August 25th. And so so that kind of plays into it. But then once like school is going, then everything gets pretty consistent from there on forward. So kind of, just bear with us over this, over this next month as we start breaking into Memories of Ice and kind of figure out our new schedule. Just be patient. You might want to crack open Memories of Ice as well. So that way you'll be ready for the first video to come out in August. And But we're just overall very, very excited for everyone who's kind of engaged with the series, and very excited for you all to join us with the next one as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess the important thing is just the next videos are coming. If they're late, they're late. But you can trust that, I think we're kind of on board for this. If at any point we decide we are not going to continue, we will make a video saying that, so you can expect that. But until we make that video, or until you see that video, they're coming at some point. But yeah, with just life and jobs and babies, we will be as consistent as we can. But yeah, just trust that they're going to come at some point. Sometimes they'll be later than others. But yeah, thanks for watching. And that's the other thing, is if you've watched our other videos, our discussions, thanks for giving us your time. We would love to, it's been super fun discussing it with Ian, and I think it's just, we both would love to chat with anybody. Like, it's just fun to gush about. So it's been fun reading your comments, and I love going in watching other people's discussions and reviews and stuff. So it's just been a lot of fun. I'm stoked to get to Memories of Ice.
Mm-hmm.
But all right, we did it. We're just at 40, 59, 60, 45 minutes. We nailed it. But yeah.
We said we were going to do 45 minutes. We didn't say when we would start that clock.
Yeah,
okay,
exactly.
just to be fair.
Well, it's 45 minutes non-spoiler, 45 minutes spoiler. So we're at an hour and a half. We friggin' nailed it.
We did it. We did it so good.
Well, thank you so much for watching. We'll see you on the next one. I'm Matt, and this is my beautiful co-host. Still beautiful.
I mean,
we'll see ya.
Is that because I got so much rest? I got my beauty sleep.
You got beauty sleep today, yeah. Well, we'll catch you on the next video. Bye.
Bye.